All right. Good evening, everybody. It's Thursday. This is a Business 101 call. I'm Dave Rolfe, and welcome to our call tonight. I put in the announcement, I was sitting having lunch and I asked the person that I was with at lunchtime, I'm got to do this Zoom call tonight. And we were talking about other businesses, and they said, what, what should I talk to them about business tonight? And they said, well, why don't you talk about what questions do you get asked the most and how do you deal with them? And I thought, this is a very interesting topic because it follows in line to what we talked about last week, which was basically the idea of prospecting. And so this is a question that you're going to get. So I'd like to get some feedback from some of the questions that you're getting to you as a Nikon distributor so that we can create a list of responses or answers that might help in your knowledge moving forward and how you handle situations. And the reason why I'm going to say that while you're thinking you can write them down is that from experience in doing network marketing, what I found was that one of the best attributes of successful network marketers was their ability to communicate and, talk about anything, anywhere, to anybody, ask questions, weren't afraid to do with it because the key to being successful is asking the questions to individuals and getting an answer as we know what we're looking for, somebody that has a necessity level and wants to do something about their current situation in life or with their family or whatever the case may be. So a lot of times you ask questions and you don't get, favorable results, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not talking to the right person. The key to it is understanding what they're saying. And so you can utilize that for moving forward to the next question. So who's got a question that they've been asked that on several occasions that they'd like to throw it on the table right now so we can discuss?
One of the greatest challenges that still exist is and it could be in my mind, the cost of doing the business. And I think I have addressed it, but in one of the situations, I said, what did I say wrong? He said, no, I'm just going to stay where I am. And I didn't understand that. And yeah, I was not afraid to quote a cost. Everything's gone up and I don't know.
I
So
can, so I think the question that you're being asked is what does it cost for the product or the business?
the product, I was upgrading
Okay.
existing customer to the new water system. And
Okay.
I couldn't understand that they just brushed it off based on cost.
Okay. So this is a great question because this is the door opener to move to where you want to get to. So let's go back one step and really make sure you understand what do you want in the person that you're talking to or to try and build your business. We know how the business works. We know that from the standpoint of our structure and the compensation plan, you've got to find distributors. Distributors do two things. They find customers and they find other distributors. And you know that if you draw that out and you put the circles on a piece of paper and you work out the leadership bonuses pays down to six levels below you. And if you're going to get paid on the sixth level, those guys have to have people below them. So you have to have a fairly large organization. Okay. So with that in mind, and you're talking about the idea of cost, what the best way to handle cost is something of comparable magnitude. And what do I mean by comparable magnitude? All right, so let's say we're going to talk business. What would it cost to set up a restaurant? And so if you use Google search, and you will find the cost of to set up a restaurant, with furnishings and all the bells and whistles and give you some idea. It could go into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars. So the idea in answering that question with regard to the product, when they ask that question, the next question is, well, in relationship to how you do mean what does it cost? Are you comparing it to something else? Or are you talking about use? Are you talking about the value of the product? Now, for example, you're looking at the waterfall. What does the waterfall produce? It produces drinking water. What's the cost of a glass of water? What's the cost of a bottle of water? And then you find out that they buy bottles of water, they go, so you want to be able to compare it to something that makes sense to lessen the cost but increase the value. And again, this was great for doing the business, because in doing the business, what's the cost of starting up this business? Well, maybe if you really think about it, $1,500, $2,000 worth of products, some business cards, a computer, a cell phone, a web page, and you really don't have to do it, and $39 to get started. And then maybe you have some money for advertising, or maybe you have some money to buy some leads, or maybe you have some money to put on parties, whatever the case may be. It's very small in comparison to the cost of doing another business. For example, in 1992, when I took a little hiatus for 3 years, my partner and I got into the wireless digital arena, and we set up an office. We had, I think, to get the office going, cost us about $100,000 just to set up the office with the right equipment, with the phones, with the desks, with the reception area and all that sort of stuff. And that was just to open the door before we started to do business. And in that period of time, we did the business for it was a little over a year, and we did a lot of business in that time frame. But in relative terms, the cost to get started was very expensive, and for most people would be cost prohibitive. So the idea of answering that question is really simple. You have a comparable that you can relate to in some way, shape, or form. Does that answer your question, Lynn?
Yes. Yes, but I think I would have to differentiate from the product. I understand there, but I could see what you're saying when I'm talking to real estate people right now.
Yeah.
Their cost of business, even the ones that work from home, is so much higher than it is for us to start.
Right.
I think
Yeah, so
I think Lynn's particular question was the fact that she had already sold the guy an aquapore and she was trying to upgrade him to the waterfall.
Yeah.
I see.
No, I got that what the question was, and I understood it, but I wanted to relate it to the idea of what we're talking about, so that you can formulate anything that you've got,
I see.
and if you have comparisons and you have other information and you can relate that to them, it makes it a lot easier. But then here's the bottom line: what are you looking for? For most of us, we want a distributor. I mean, if you're trying to build the business, you want distributors, because distributors do two things. They find customers, and they also find other distributors, who then in turn find customers and find other distributors, who then in turn, and that once that process starts, it never stops, provided you put your attention on making sure that it doesn't stop. So we come back to the question, okay, find somebody to work with and then help them build to create that process and keep it going until it's self-sufficient, or to what I called in my first book, Vested Interest, the need to qualify. Because once the need to qualify occurs, then it's a no-brainer to build this kind of a business, or any business related to where you're relying on qualification and volume to build the business. Okay, somebody else have a question that they've had a lot of that they want an answer to?
Dave, I'm talking to a young man. He's going to be finishing community college. He's 22 or 23.
Uh-huh.
He's studying finance and accounting.
Yeah.
He's working with a company that does, college kids who do painting. So he doesn't, he can do the painting, but he's built a team of people who can do the painting, and he's the contact person for the prospective customers. So he came out to do an estimate to, do exterior trim for my home. And just the nicest kid, um, very polite, very responsible. If he says, I'll call you in 10 minutes, he calls me in 10 minutes,
Okay.
so, which I like. And I told him that. I said, I only agreed to even meet with you because I was impressed with your follow-up and all of that. You're being courteous and all of that. Anyway, so he was here once, I think, for quite a while, doing the checking out my exterior and all, and of course was inside telling me, and then was back to give me numbers and stuff.
Sure.
So, I asked if he'd be open to doing some demonstrations with me of what I'm involved in. So I did the water, the bracelet, or the necklace, the insoles. He was impressed with everything. I sent him home with a little sample of the KVB, um, and he's into healthy eating as well, and
Okay.
taking care of his body. And so I, but he's got finals coming up. He's got all these appointments with people in the evening, particularly when he's done with classes and when they're off work and on the weekends and all.
Okay.
But he is interested in learning more
Okay.
about the products and the business.
Sure.
And so anyway, we'll follow up on that and, probably set up an ABC. I had mentioned about, because I tried to send him the video from Empowered Living from the weekend when Ruth Lowe and Kimball Sargent and Mike did it on the financial pillar.
Hmm.
And he said his phone isn't holding storage.
Okay, Sylvia, what's the question?
So I guess um, the good thing is he's open to learning more,
Okay.
and also I said, do you know anybody else who might also be interested? No, actually, he brought that up. He said, I think I might know a few other people who might be interested. I said, in the products or in the business? He said, I think in both. So,
Okay. So I just hold your thought for a minute here because I would like to clarify something.
yes, please.
And I'm going to go back to, and I get totally where you're at. Again, if we liken our business to a factory and at the beginning, and this was in the book Vested Interest, at the beginning is a front door, and in the front door goes raw materials. Well, raw materials in our particular case are people that you run into and start communicating with. So now, what you really need to understand in doing this business is what don't they know
Uh, mm-hmm,
versus what do they know? Because a lot of people are quite polite and they're going to say yes and they're going to nod their head, but that doesn't necessarily mean they understand what you're saying.
mm-hmm,
So the idea of the factory is you've got to have, if you have lots of people coming in the front door, what's the next step that should occur once they come in the front door? Well, again, and you guys have heard lots of stories about this from me and what I did. Because of my position, I understood what I was looking for. And what I came to realize very quickly that if I found distributors, I could grow the business very quickly and get to the income levels that I wanted to get to because that's how the business works. It also works if you have lots of customers. There's a few distributors that have plenty of customers and they do extremely well and they've been doing it for a long time and they've got a real good niche to that. Either they're in the medical profession or they're in some kind of a healing capacity or whatever the case may be. So they focus their attention on what they know and how they know how to communicate and ask the right questions about the person that they're talking to. So from my perspective, what I was taught was, okay, I want to find somebody that has a necessity level and wants to do something now. Okay, so in here's this young guy comes to do some painting and you ask him a question and the questions that you ask him, he has no idea about the products. And then, he'd have to try those to have a real good understanding if you think about it. And second, you probably haven't had a sit down to show him what the business is all about, how it works, and how he could make a small fortune because you haven't got to that position of finding out if that's what he can do. But then you found out he's got finals and he's got all these other jobs to do and he doesn't have much time. So then I would look back at what you want, and is that what you want? So if I was filling up my factory pipeline, I would have a whole bunch of people like that I'm working with that I'm going to talk with over time. But on a daily basis, I'm out there looking for the person that's going to say yes now.
Okay, yes.
Okay. So, but here's really where it boils down to is really starting to understand the people that you're talking to and asking them the questions that will direct answers towards what it is you want. So I see you're doing this as a job. Is this something that you need to do? Would be a great question. So, well, does he need to or doesn't he need to it? Why is he doing this job? How come he's doing this job? All of those kind of questions, because you would like to get an idea of his character and how his responsibility level and etc. So he knows lots of people. So somewhere in your conversation, he must have got the idea that other people are involved. And so, but here would be the most ideal situation is, listen, I'd love to sit down and explain this. Let me ask you a question. Would you be interested in making an extra 5 or 10,000 a month? And the reason why you ask, or whatever the question is, the reason why you ask that question is you want to know where he's at. You want to know what, and again, you know me, Dee. I've tell you, you've been on my calls forever and a day, and I don't like to mince words and I don't like to play around. And I can tell you the statistics of our business and our company for the last 36 years. And if you're going to make it in this business and you want to survive in this business, you need to find people that want to build the business like you do. And Leo would probably vouch for that one 100%. So so again, in prospecting, what are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to find out or find somebody that's based on our requirements, what we want and what we need. So the more people coming in the front door to your opportunity, the more opportunity you learn how to communicate with those people, ask the right questions, and find the answer. So let's say you ask this guy the question. He said, "Yeah, I need to do this to get myself through college or through school." Well, let me ask you a question. What do you think you're going to do for a career? Maybe you should take a look at what I do in the distribution business. You could make a small fortune. Would you be interested to sit down and talk about that? So what are you doing here? You're kind of forcing a situation to occur, yes or no? And you let's put it this way. I had a guy that I prospected and I chased for 7 years because I thought he was going to be the distributor of all distributors. And I thought he was going to be the guy that would go to, the top of the business and be an anchor in my business. He never did. Talk's cheap. He talked a good game. He certainly made me. I chased this guy forever, but I also saw that in the investment arena. I would phone up people for the investment in the oil and gas business and say, yeah, I can spend 40, 50,000 to get involved. Yeah, I invest all the time. And then, yeah, you do the presentation. Yeah, this sounds really good. I think I'd like to do it. Call me back tomorrow. And then you'd never get them on the phone again. So the lesson I learned was, and also in other aspects of my life, you better ask the question now, and you better get the answer that you want so that you save yourself a whole bunch of time. And here's the end of that one. You won't screw up the right person. You will not lose the right person. If it's the right person, they'll say yes. If it's the right person, they'll say, I want to know as much as you can tell me. How does this work? If you look at the internet, if you look at the business world, if you look at everything that's going on in society now, what's out there? They're pushing get rich quick, all kinds of them. Tony Robbins is still out there pounding the pavement with now AI. And there are all these businesses. Oh, do this to make this much. Do this to do this. Improve your, invest in the stock market. Gamble on sports things. Whatever. They're pushing the same stuff. Well, how do you do it? How do you make it work? See, the trick to your success here, and I know we're kind of going off the rails, but the trick to your success here is knowledge. How do you do it? How do you make it work? So that's the question that, so you got this young man, he's in his 20s, probably has no idea where he's going to go. He has no idea what's out there. The job market is really tough today. And you got to be very good or very special to get anywhere, but yet you got a ton of people that are begging to make extra money. This is so ripe for our business. I'm beside myself thinking about it. So the key question is you have to paint the picture that they grab onto. I'm sitting in the audience. I'm the only guy in the audience, and I'm desperate to find something to sink my teeth into to make money. Didn't do well in school, so I was looking for some kind of business. And the guy says, Dave, how would you like to own a Coca-Cola machine on every corner of every street, and every time somebody bought a Coke, you made a nickel? Well, I almost fell out of my chair after I heard that one. Literally. Because all I could see was, oh my God. That just lit, what it did was it lit up opportunity, it lit up future, it lit up possibility, it lit up limitless, it lit up all kinds of things in my mind that I could grab onto in the sense of, going after a dream or going after something I wanted to handle. So most people are not going to just walk up to you and say, hey, I understand you're a Nikon distributor. I want to sign up and go Royal Diamond. I mean, if that happened, boy, I'd fall off. I'd fall off my chair too. So it's like a romance. You got to start off and you got to ask questions. You got to find out who they are. You got to find what makes them tick. And then once somebody lights up like a light bulb, oh my God, marry them. Because, and here's the homework on that to make it, draw out a Royal Diamond in your business. What that looks like. That's somebody that's doing 300,000 points. Draw out what that looks like. and really understand the value of that kind of a person in your business. You could do it for platinums, you could do it for diamonds, you could do it for anybody that you want. So coming back to your guy, in the sense of answering the question is you want to hone in as quickly as possible to ask the questions that relate most to you. So what are you looking for, Dee?
Well, I'd be looking for a royal diamond for
There
sure.
you go. So therefore, those are the questions that you've got to ask, and that's the picture you got to paint, and then you got to find out if that character is going to fit into that picture. So you're the movie producer, and you're going through a screening process. Is really what it's all about. You know, again, I talked to hundreds of people over my career, probably thousands in terms of the years that I've been involved, and not all of them said yes, and not all of them jumped up and down with joy. All the circumstances were different, but what that gave me was an education on how to ask the right questions and how to look for what it was that I wanted so that I didn't waste my time, because time's a precious commodity. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So going back to him, I would probably call him back and say, listen, I've been thinking about our conversation. Let me ask you a question. I'm expanding my business. I'm looking for somebody to work with, and would you be interested in the area of $5,000-$10,000 a month in income? Can't promise that overnight, but I can know if we get together, you and I can make that quite easily in the next year or so. What do you say? So here's the choice. And again, you've got to really look at this. What could he say to that?
I think he'd be interested for sure. At
He could
least
say
to
yes or
learn.
he could say no.
Right, right.
Okay. But here's what I found out, and this is very important. This relates to all of you. If you can't answer the question, you won't ask it. If you can't ask the question or answer the question, you won't ask it. So one of the things I learned very early on, because I needed to make $8,000 a month. In the United States today, just saw this on the internet, the average income required to live, the average across the board in the United States to retire in this country is $5,000 a month. That's not the medium, that's not the high, the low, that's the average. So in California, it's probably $10,000 a month. So talking those kind of numbers is not strange to what people need to make a living in today's world. You all know what you need to make. You all know what your budgets are. You all know what your cost of living is. Well, anybody you talk to is in the same boat you are. And what you're looking for is somebody that's dissatisfied with their current situation, needs a change, and they're looking for an answer. So here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to talk to them about stuff they don't understand. You want to talk to them about stuff they can relate to. So in other words, you don't talk to them about network marketing, but you explain it like Starbucks coffee. So again, they can relate to that because they see Starbucks every day, or McDonald's or Burger King or whatever. The same kind of idea. It's the same concept. It's just on a larger scale. So again, the more you know and understand about your business, the easier it is to communicate to other people and ask questions to get what it is that you want. And consider yourself, you're the boss, you're hiring people. So you need to make sure that they're qualified to do the job. Now, here's the other aspect of this, which is very important. Because it doesn't cost very much to get involved, and because there's no contract and they're not getting paid, it works on a slightly different mechanic. People leave faster than they sign up. Well, and the reason that happens is because, number one, they weren't educated properly, and they didn't get help in building their business, and they were left to themselves. And there's no need for that. And that's why in today's economy, in today's marketplace, you don't need a whole bunch of people. You just need one or two. But you work with the one or two to get one or two to get one or two. And if you measure that out and create the picture, you'll see how easy it is to work it. And then once you have one successful leg, then you got a story. And you heard that before. So again, that's would be the answer, Dee, for where I would go with this guy. And on top of that, I would have 10 more of those guys. And here's why. See, you want to be able to waste your activity. A lot of people get involved with this business and they hold on thinking, I got to tell you the story because it's so true. My first month in the business, I had 18 distributors. We did 18,000 in volume. And at that level, we used to have this level called bronze. And I made it to bronze, which was, I think, 15,000 points. But then when I looked over my 18 distributors, not one of them was really a distributor. It was like they just signed up. They really didn't have the know-how. They didn't have the knowledge. They weren't going to carry it forward as it turned out. And I had to start all over in month 2. So what I saw over time was you can think you have something when you don't. And you can end up wasting time in the wrong areas, especially if you don't do it right. What do I mean by don't do it right? Okay. We're a warm market business per se. And I mean that by it's the easiest way to go when you're brand new and you haven't used your warm market for anything else, and you can talk to your warm market because everybody can sign up at least one person. That's the statistic that's been around since network marketing started, at least one person. So, and I used to teach this from stage, and I would talk to new distributors. Okay, you sign up one person, then you take that person. Well, who do you know that would join you? And you go to that person and you drive it as deep as you can. And then eventually you're going to find the same thing that you do if you went wide. A hot distributor. Yeah, I really want you to get that concept because it's the same thing. So whether you turn the page sideways or upright, your job is to go out there and talk to as many different people as you possibly can until you find somebody that says, hey, this is it. I'm in. Let's go. And they go, right? Well, you can find that by going wide or you can find it by going deep. When you go wide and you find that person, it only helps you and those above you. I'm going to tell you a secret. It doesn't matter who's above you. It only matters who's below you. I want you to think about that. You can have a great upline, but you can't spend their money. And if you don't build the business, they're not going to talk to you for very much longer. It's the way it is. It's the nature of the beast. So what is so important for you is somebody underneath that's actually building the business along with you. And once you have that one person, you've got a story. And I can tell you for 36 years, the lack of success was related to the lack of a story. Real simple. There was no mystery to this. There's no magic sauce. There's no secret. There is no secret. It's just plain old-fashioned business. You talk to enough people, you find somebody that wants to go, and then you help them build and drive it as deep as you possibly can. And every time I did that, it would go down by maybe the third level, fourth level, fifth level, or sixth level. Somebody would light up, and then that would light up 5 other people, or 4 other people, or 3 other people. Whereas when you go wide, it only lights up you. And you're back to the same formula. You got to get underneath that person and create a downline for them to get them to that point where they have the need to qualify to continue on. Because if they don't get to that point, they're going to quit for the most part. Not going to expand the business. Maybe they'll sell some retail product. Maybe they'll do a little bit. But in order to make this work, you know what it takes. If you want to do $5,000 a month today as a residual income at 6%, divided by 6%, you're talking 83,000 in CV. We're at about a 60% CV rate. Divide that by 60%, you're talking 138,000 in retail sales. Okay, or wholesale sales. So let's say that the average person did 500 points divided by 500. You got to have 277 people in your organization. So if you got 1 and you helped that person get 2 or 3, and then you took those 4 and you helped them, it grows real fast. By the time you got down to the 5th level, you'd have your 277 people in one leg. And then you can duplicate that into the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th. So, and why does that work? It works, it's just like anything else. It's interest, benefits, action, which we talked about. So you're going to get involved and do things based on perceived benefits. And once you change those perceived to real, you're in like Flint. And it's like anything else, you know, if you're in the stock market, if you make money in real estate, if you invest in small businesses, whatever it is that you do, you continue to do if you're winning. You stop if you don't, for the most part. Unless you're, you know, there's something else. Now, here's the other side of the coin here with our business. There's a real conflict between emotion on the side of the emotional side of our business versus the practical side and income. So there's a lot of people that are involved emotionally for social reasons, camaraderie, friendship, all of that stuff that helps them. And I know people that have been in this business don't do anything, that just do it because they feel that there's a group that they can belong to and they socialize with. And that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But the idea of the calls that we've been doing, especially Monday night and now Thursday night, are related to building a business. So I'm only going to talk in those terms. Okay, so to wrap this up, these are, you know, again, you really have to understand what you are trying to accomplish, and you have to know all the parts. And it'd be like being an owner of a sports team, or an owner of a franchise, or the owner of a big business. You know, how does it work? And if you can answer that question, and there's certainly enough videos on daverolf.com or Dave Rolf YouTube, and the Michael and Dave on Royal Alliance to answer those questions. Once you've got that down, then you have to understand what needs to be done. And from network marketing, and everybody that's ever done network marketing and all the books that you've read about network marketing and building this business, you got to talk to lots of people. And in talking to lots of people, you got to find out what they need and want, and then you got to help them get it. And I don't know anybody that was successful in this business that didn't get help to build their business. I'll say that again. I don't know anybody, and I've watched every single person go from the bottom to the top who didn't get help. And so, in some cases, lots of help. Either from corporate, from the leadership up above, whatever the case may be, big gurus, you know. So the key here is with anybody new, they need the same. They need help. Because if they didn't need help, they'd do it on their own and they wouldn't come to you. It's as simple as that. So, and most of the people that are coming in are dissatisfied with where they're at, aren't making it, don't see the opportunity, whatever the case may be. So you have to then paint the picture and provide them with the information that's going to act as an answer or a solution, just like people are doing today on Google search. They got a question, they Google search. They get an instantaneous answer. So guess what you got to do? You got to pretty much give them an instantaneous answer that they like to hear. So you got to ask good questions. And you got to be prepared in the social chit chat that you don't ask the question too early, because you want to make sure when you ask the right question that's going to move you forward, that you're talking to the right kind of person that's at least somewhat qualified. It's like when I was doing the investments, we'd phone them up. Well, do you invest? There was a question, a qualifying question. All of those things. Have you ever got in oil and gas? Have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? And if you could, would you? And if you liked what you had, how much could you? I would ask distributors when I started, if you like what I'm saying, can you spend? We were different numbers back then. $4,000 to $5,000 to get started. And if they didn't answer in a positive direction, then I would try and clarify that. So, okay, so what would you feel comfortable with starting with? Well, I could probably spend $2,500. Okay, great. So then why did I ask that question? Well, I wanted to know if they were willing to put some skin in the game. Because if they don't, then it makes it awfully difficult to make this work, because one of the values of what we have in terms of product is the emotional impact that people get by utilizing our product. So how do you create that emotional impact? Well, again, if I'm looking at a good distributor and I know where that could go, that person could go diamond to royal diamond, that we could have hundreds, if not thousands of people underneath them, all kinds of retail customers, et cetera, and moving hundreds of thousands of volume through that, what's that worth to me? Worth a lot. So what if I had a waterfall as a demo product? Or what if I had a sleep system as a demo product? I did that with Howard. I had a sleep system. I said, here, try this. Tell me what you think. Calls me 2 days after he had it. Said, well, I don't know what you got, Dave, but I'm in. Because he had the emotional experience of the product, but I also talked to him, I found the goose that laid the golden egg. Now, I understood who he was. He had worked for me before. He was a top broker. I knew his work ethic. I knew how he would operate, and I had something that I could offer him. And then I helped him build his business. So that's the idea. Okay, we're at 9:04. So good call. I'll record this and get it done hopefully on the weekend and post it. And then next week we'll go on to that. If you have any comments that you'd like to, or topics that you want to talk about, write them down in the WhatsApp chat on Smart Networker or on Dave Rolfe, and we'll attend to that. Otherwise, I'll keep bringing up topics that I hear that are most needed and wanted. Anybody have any last words to say?
Thank you so much, Dave. I have 4 on my group here. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right.
Good boy.
You get with those guys and you help build them, Leo.
Yeah.
All right, buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay,
Thank
you guys
you.
have a good night. We'll talk
Talk to you
soon.
more.
Okay. Bye-bye.